The dispute heads to court as union TSC talks fail. This is on page 8 of the Standard of the crisis that are about to rock the labor sector. Talking about the dispute that is touching on the teachers. There's another dispute of the nurses. Nurses strike looms as 20 counties say they have no money to pay. There's a threat that they are going to down their tools come 4th of February, that is on Monday. And civil servants also threatening to down tools of allowances that were promised in, is it 2011 or which year was it? 2017, June 2017. And we have seen less strikes since the doctor strike of 2017 up to March or thereabout. But when you look at this crisis that we're seeing now on the papers, are we better at managing our disputes, and why are we coming up with the collective bargaining agreements but not able to implement them to the letter, Senator?
Well, it means someone somewhere is not doing their work. If you agree on something and someone goes behind your back and fails to do, I'm sure most of these things are probably meant because of corruption, whereby the right funds which are supposed to be channeled to cater for the workers is not done. It's done, the money goes elsewhere. Because by the time you're entering into these agreements, you're able, you are able to pay, and this is the law. So the people have a right, according to the labor laws, to agitate and fight for their rights, and that's why you're seeing a lot of strikes, and it happens in many countries, even in India. I remember I studied in India. Every now and then there were strikes on the way, but people will always solve them. The most important thing is, by the end of the day, sit down and discuss them and solve it in a civilized manner. So that as the problems are there, the country is moving on. We don't come to a standstill. Like that doctor's strike was very unfortunate because we lost lives. And as usual, it's the women who suffer most. Yeah, so these are things which should not be allowed.
Right, and you are saying that you will be going to court shortly, but before you do, we see most of these things, they're ending up at the courts. For instance, the teachers' issue is at the courts. There is a preference in the Constitution for alternative dispute resolution, but you still appear not to have taken it up. Yes, there are attempts to have a conciliatory team for the teachers and the Teacher Service Commission, but very little emerges in terms of productive results. What's wrong?
Yeah, by way of example, I was a strong opponent to the doctor's strike. You know, what we must also credit the government for, you know, sometimes you have, although it does, most of the time it gets it wrong, but sometimes the government does really get it right, and it lacks supporters. You know, the way unions have been negotiating with government, negotiation, Sam, it presupposes availability of options, that you can change positions. I mean, but it appears to us that our local unions develop already a hard stance, and they want to see how far they can stretch the government. When at that time, if they are teachers, the kids are suffering. If they are doctors, the hospital, the patients, Kenyans are suffering. And sometimes, what I've seen with a lot of shock and dismay, that whereas Kenyans pile pressure on government to abide by the law, unions have been openly disrespecting court orders. You know, we must choose. We must choose to live right. If you want to disobey court orders, next time don't ask anybody to obey court orders. Because unions decide, most of the time there have been orders, that the labor courts issue orders directing unions to call their people to go back to work. They reject, they defy those orders. Negotiations are happening while there's a valid court order that is binding but has been rejected. My party shot is this. Kenya is still an emerging economy. Let us have graduated, reasonable demands. I mean, we must say that also. We must be open to reason. You can't be coming with demands that are obviously unachievable just because you're a union, and what you're agitating for appeals to the masses that you represent. That also requires some honesty. If we are negotiating in honesty, and once the government commits, even the government must also ensure that which it has signed, if there's a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, signed by both parties, it must honor it. I'm again unimpressed. Look at what government did. The police have been complaining, and we also complain, amplify their voices. There was discussion, proposals announced by the government that house allowance for police officers will be 18,000. Nobody cornered the government to announce that. Then they come back in February and tell them,
after consultations.
There was no consultation. They just come back and tell them, now it's 9,000. I mean,
no, they said after consultations with SRC.
But why didn't you consult SRC before, prior, Sam? You see, these are the things that demoralize right-thinking Kenyans. Once you make a commitment, honor that commitment.
Right.
Negotiate in good faith, realizing that government is collecting taxes from overburdened Kenyans, don't have outrageous and unachievable demands, but once you reach a settlement, government, be careful to observe your part of the bargain. Then we will move forward as a unified country.
Okay, all right. Steve Ogolla, they are speaking about the situation in the trade sector, or the labor sector. But you've been a minister before and you have probably witnessed, even if not in your department, you've seen these kind of situations affecting what? Affecting the labor sector. What is the ultimate solution? Because they will continue to be there because employees will keep agitating for better remuneration.
Yes, I've been a minister and I'm likely to be one soon. God willing, I mean, really, because each politician must have an ambition to do better than what he's doing. There are a number of challenges. I think the government at times makes promises out of political pressure. You can see the promise that was done 2017 in June was possibly meant to galvanize a certain constituency towards voting for the government, which probably they did or they may not have done. And therefore, the government has come to the realization that what they promised at that time cannot be matched by the resources. Because increasingly, the taxes that we are raising is going towards retiring debts to the extent of 50% of the taxes that we collect will go towards retiring the debt. Number two, there is a bit of lethargy in terms of the civil servants who are dealing with the issues at hand, such that if it is about negotiation with, let's say, teachers' union, they dust the papers on the eve of those negotiations, and therefore they go ill-prepared. I say this with a lot of information because they do not. And I remember I used to have a lot of frustration with the lawyers who were supposed to be representing my ministry in various court cases. That you realize somebody, even when the case is there, may not even be aware that the following day they are supposed to go to Kisumu to defend a case on the issues of sugar or so forth. So it becomes almost easy for those who are negotiating against the government to win, because the government should have prepared itself, should have looked for all the options before they go to the negotiating table. I want to agree with Steve that yes, it is true, in any negotiation you must have options. And therefore the government, they should not go only with option one. They should also have options that in case this fails, what else are we going to offer as a way of mitigating the situation? So in future, I think government officers ought to be upbeat in terms of their work. Ministers ought to be hands-on, so that anything that is happening in your ministry, you cannot say it was a junior officer. Once you are a minister in charge of a certain portfolio, you are always in charge of that portfolio. And therefore, anything else, you cannot have an excuse that it was a junior officer. You are ultimately responsible to the president and to the people of Kenya.
Okay, and I want to look at some feedback because Steve Ogolla has to leave. Before he does, the president has been annoyed for far too long. This shouldn't be the case. He needs to act. Majority of Kenyans are interested in service delivery, and the president shouldn't be concerned of any political ramifications emanating from sacking non-performing cabinet secretaries. Soon, Kenyans may not take him seriously, and this may not augur well for him. We are also being frustrated by his potentless anger. That is comment from Mildred. I think he sort of agrees with your line of thinking. Of course, that's from SMS 22422. And on Twitter, I'm trying to see if we have anything. Well, you've been saying a lot. Some of them are unpalatable.
Seeing my photo there, what are they saying?
Let me see. The idea of appointing cabinet secretary who aren't politicians was to appoint those who could concentrate in doing their duties without being involved in politics. But it seems our CSs are more of politicians than civil servants. What happened? That is Samuel Orutwa. You don't say where you're watching us from. Who else? Well, I cannot read that. Anyway, so you see Kenyans talking about the frustration because they're looking for service delivery. But as you leave, I asked a question on who is the president speaking to. We didn't appear to find that answer. So as you leave, how do we stop those? Because it appears that these are things that are said behind the scenes.
I think what we need now going forward, but I like the president's anger. Because if only can match that anger with this decision, firm decision.
Watch that space.
This is a time we need to be sufficiently angry to be able to reverse. We're not going to cajole each other, you know, and then when you're sufficiently angry, that's when you can make a critical decision.
But also you're told not to make a decision when you're angry.
No, as in determined. You know, when people think they have options and they have time, you know, if the president maintains the momentum, he's likely to achieve something, you know. And I hope I can almost bet that none of the CSs probably takes him seriously until he acts, because he has always spoken like that before, you know. So if he's able to match that, that would be good. I think my parting shot would be this. From listening to the discussion I'm having here with Mheshimiwa Sigenya and Mheshimiwa Kirwa, it may be necessary to have an audit of the Constitution so that we see what kind of adjustment. You know, sometimes we've had a period of constitutional turbulence, making honest mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. What we must reject are deliberate mistakes that are intended or designed to sabotage the Constitution and antagonize the Republic. Those ones we must reject. But honest mistakes, as part of learning, let us consolidate these mistakes and say, this is our experience in the last so many years, you know, since 2010.
Okay.
What are the kind of adjustments that we need? Are you going to make some constitutional adjustments? Are you going to make some legislative interventions? But I think the greatest adjustment is a matching attitude. There is a serious disjunction between what the Constitution seeks to inspire and the stubborn attitude that we have not disinherited. We have moved into the post-2010 dispensation with the old mindset. One day we'll come back here and discuss how this Constitution in its architecture and design promotes inclusion. So me, when I talk about let's open it up to include more, to make it more inclusive, I feel a bit embarrassed, you know, because already the design is there, but the inclusion that politicians want is what works for them, not what works for Kenya. If you have an audit and all sectoral players that work within the Constitution, let them give feedback. Let's have one document that tells us this is the kind of adjustments we need. Then, over and above that, we have good manners, decency, a settled approach on what is right and wrong. We might just achieve a lot within this remaining 4 years. Yes.